All matcha in the 1,000 years of history in Japan has been organic. And yet today, less than 1% of all tea grown in Japan, including matcha, is organic. This is surprising, especially considering organic is becoming more popular in the Americas pretty much every single year. You might have even noticed that many high-end producers of tea simply don't offer organic choices, with, frankly, Ooika, my company, being one of them. So what's the deal? Why is organic matcha and organic tea seemingly not popular? Why does it have a bad reputation? And why is it so hard to find? In this video, we're gonna find out.
大分引き立ての抹茶をアメリカで
All right, a little disclaimer before we begin. Food is something that is extremely personal. Figured that it's still a good disclaimer to have in case you have strong feelings otherwise. Keep doing what you do, and this is just my take. Okay, we need to start by actually defining what organic is, and I'm going to define it as specifically the USDA organic certification. This certification implies that you're not using synthetic chemicals, you're not using genetically modified organisms, and you have a certain level of care and appreciation for the quality of your local environment, soil, water, things like that. Now note that I said implied, and that's because organic doesn't mean that synthetic chemicals cannot be used. In fact, they can. There are many allowances. In fact, in my description below, you can find links to what those allowances are. And organic does not even mean that pesticide and pesticide residues are not on the final food product, only that they're not allowed to use them during the production process. If you're a farmer in Japan, you have to make a choice. Will your farm be organic? To make that choice, first you have to understand what the requirements actually are. The first requirement is simply following USDA practices and procedures. Next, we have the requirement to comply with a list of prohibited substances. This includes, again, synthetic chemicals, but also genetically modified organism, things like that. Most importantly, this includes having a buffer zone between your farm that's organic and another farm that is not organic. And in Japan, this is a big problem. And that's because Japan has very strict rules over land use. One company cannot own huge amounts of land. When you see those beautiful shots of Japan, where you see all these fields everywhere, well, those fields are actually individual little farms of farmers who own land in a larger co-op. So that way, not one company owns too much land. Sort of like the Minesweeper. If one of them has non-organic, the other one surrounding it can't be organic. Next up, we have soil and water quality. This means that USDA organic farms will preserve and test the quality of the water and the soil. This means for the farmer is that they need to do just that. They need to pay for testing, usually annual testing of soil and water, and these tests get very expensive. USDA encourages the use of organic seeds when available. Of course, this doesn't matter so much for Japanese tea because the vast amount of Japanese tea is clones. They're not grown from seeds. Our next requirement is a 3-year delay period between converting a non-organic farmland into organic. You can't grow anything on it. You can't plant trees. You have to wait a full 3 years. You will be paying taxes on it. You will be tending to it. You'll be taking care of it, but you will not be able to generate profit. Tea trees require about 5 years of growth after they're planted in order to get a first harvest. In other words, 8 full years of not earning any money. Another requirement is writing an organic systems plan on day-to-day operations, logistics, distribution, everything. On that note is also record keeping. Organic farms need to have meticulous records. In fact, after 1 year of record keeping, an average farm will have enough paper to make almost a 3-foot tall stack of paper. That's just 1 year. Organic farms are required to have inspections, and these inspections by USDA agents are paid for by the farms. And finally, we have the actual organic certification fees. Is the extra work worth it for a tea farmer? Well, one way you can answer that is by looking at the opportunity or the coming opportunity by visualizing the American interest in organic. As organic becomes more popular in America every year, which it does, more farmers will likely become interested in producing organic tea to capitalize on that market. America spent a total of $25.14 billion on organic foods in 2011, and that number basically doubled in 2019 to over $50 billion. Now, of all the Americans that actually bought organic foods, why did they buy it? 75% of them bought it because, again, they saw it as healthier. 33% bought organic because they saw it as better for the environment. And 22% of people bought it for convenience, which basically means it was there.
大イカだよ。
Let's analyze this a bit. Is organic food actually healthier, and is it better for the environment? We take these things for granted, but what does the data actually say? And yes, this will all come back to why organic tea is so rare. Is organic food healthier? What do we mean by healthier? Well, I broke it down into two categories. First is healthier as in more nutritious, as in you get more nutrients when you eat it. The second category is less bad for you, as in there's less toxins, pesticides, things that will harm your health in the short or long term. So there was a meta-analysis. It was actually the largest meta-analysis on organic food that's ever been done, with over 237 cited studies by 2 Stanford doctors. The result was, and I quote, "No strong evidence that organic foods are more nutritious or carry fewer health risks than conventional alternatives." But what about less bad for you? Again, the same report showed that there was no short or long-term health effects that came from eating conventional over organic. They're basically the same. Health doesn't change. But one thing the study did find was that organic produce, on average, had about 30% less chance of having pesticide residue. I've had people reach out to Ooika talk about their sensitivity to pesticides. So let's go ahead and discuss this. Pesticides, both organic and conventional, have the risk of having pesticide contamination. As far as conventional food, a 2018 FDA study found that 97% of food was below the tolerable limit for pesticide contamination, while 47% of the food had no pesticide contamination at all, 0. And this is conventional. And a quick note, also according to the FDA, that 1 to 3% that had contamination above the tolerable limit doesn't mean there was any health risk at all. Simply that the pesticide was improperly applied. The EPA sets the tolerable limit at 100 to 1,000 times above the amount required to be considered harmful for human health. Let's put all of this into perspective. First, the toxicity of a substance is based on its LD50. This might be something you heard in a science class that you took years ago. LD50 means the lethal dose, basically the amount that you need to take to kill 50% of the animal population that takes it. Now, everything has an LD50. You drink too much water, you're going to die. The higher the number, the safer it is because it takes more of that substance to kill 50% of the animal population that takes it. The lower the number, the more dangerous. Everyday table salt, for example, takes 3,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight to get an LD50. Vitamin D3, on the other hand, has an LD50 of 37 milligrams per kg of body weight. Most people associate eating table salt as being very bad for you and eating vitamin D being very good for you. But despite this, you can say that vitamin D is literally 100 times more toxic than table salt. Botox, by the way, is one of the most dangerous of the LD50s, and even with Botox, it's still used for facelifts. It's still a substance that people use. Also, it's important to note, it kind of doesn't matter whether it's synthetic or naturally created. A chemical is a chemical. Everything is chemical. Okay, to explore this idea further, let's look at one of the most popular pesticides in the United States. Glyphosate has an LD50 of 5,000 milligrams per kg of body weight. Another chemical we'll look at is 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. This chemical has an LD50 of 200 milligrams per kg of body weight. This makes it more toxic than an equal amount of these chemicals: hydrochloric acid, solanine, which is the poison in the nightshade family, and even arsenic. 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine is almost as toxic as the drug MDMA, DDT, the now banned pesticide, and finally, uranium. Based on this, 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine is about 28 times more toxic than glyphosate. Of course, 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine has a more common name: caffeine. Blue room. Okay, so I'm currently editing the video that you're watching. There's the Premiere file right there. But it struck me that I should also mention this kind of interesting fact, which is caffeine is actually a pesticide. Plants produce, specifically the tea plant, but also the coffee plant and other plants, produce caffeine as a way to, well, kill pests. It is a natural pesticide. So it kind of struck me that when we talk about pesticides, caffeine is in fact one of them. It's just naturally occurring instead of synthetic. Well, anyway, let's get back into it. Where this gets really interesting is if the EPA were to set its own tolerable limit of caffeine based on the same 100 to 1,000 times less than the requirement to cause harm to a person, it would mean you would reach the tolerable limit of caffeine with a cup of coffee after you have about 1 tablespoon of it. In terms of matcha, you would be able to have about half a tablespoon of matcha before you hit the tolerable limit for caffeine. Now keep in mind, this is only a hypothetical. After all, the LD50 does not look at things such as long-term exposure risks. But this is more to illustrate how strict the EPA is when it comes to setting tolerable limits of things like pesticides. As an interesting side note, glyphosate does have a slight carcinogenic risk, as the International Agency for Research on Cancer has listed it as a Class 2A carcinogenic. This group, Class 2A carcinogenic, also includes things like working a nighttime shift, working as a barber, working as a roofer, not because of the sunlight, by the way, but because of the off-gas of the roofing, eating red meat. And finally, most surprising, it has the same classification as drinking hot beverages. Yes, you slightly increase the risk of cancer when you drink anything that's above 65 degrees Celsius. The point here is you probably don't have much to worry about with the tolerable limits of pesticide. The meta-analysis that we spoke about showed that there is no long-term or short-term risk for anyone who consumes the tolerable limits of these chemicals, even for infants. And in Japan, which is significantly more strict with their regulations as far as chemicals, it's even safer there. But in America, it's already safe. I really didn't want to do a part 2, but we're doing a part 2. In order to really understand why organic tea and matcha doesn't really exist, at least high quality options, although that's a little bit of a generalization, it's really important to understand the whole picture. So in this part 1, we covered the interest in organic and some of the challenges for farmers to adopt organic, as well as covering the supposed health benefits of organic. In the next video, we're gonna get more into the environmental issues and then specifically talk about the Japanese culture, why the Japanese culture is not embracing organic the way that the American culture is. And then finally, with all of this context, we can actually talk more deeply about the experience of the Japanese tea farmers and why they're so resistant to embracing USDA organic. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what you think about organic tea. Have you tried it? Did you find it to be as delicious as conventional? Or maybe you do buy organic and you have your own reasons for that. And if you do, I would love to hear what they are. Okay, I'll talk with you guys soon. See you next week.
Ooika です。